Good morning again. Ralph E. Hartman out here on the Beneva roadside. Write-in candidate for Congress to be representative for District 17. I still believe that I'd be a good representative. Pertaining to the previous message about the secret accusation from Daytona Beach 1979 that I learned about 30 years after. I learned subsequently that a symptom of the matter actually involved my grandfather, a man by the name of Reginald Byleth, who staged his death months later in August of 1970. I know it doesn't seem likely, but it is true, and my mother one time commented about her perspective and her opinion pertaining to her family that she might have hardly been subjugated by in the beginning. Was a day when I was sitting in the hallway of the dental building on Curtis Avenue across from Gulfgate Drive when she was briefly in traffic disturbance saying, "The strangest family." And you know, I didn't really, all through the previous years, I wouldn't have really guessed about that, and there are probably many details that I still don't know about. But anyway, one of the strange details is that Reginald Byleth staged his death in Sebring back in August of 1979. If you check, when I checked Truth Finders, I started to learn about the matter, I don't know, I guess it was around 10 years ago. One day I was in the dental garden when the first time I heard Reginald Byleth actually comment, he wanted his voice to sound like it was between very large slabs of concrete or stone, and wanted to sound very menacing about it. So I think, you know, it is significant. I had attended his funeral. I was a pallbearer in his funeral in Sebring. He was mostly a very reclusive man. My mother says he began life being a skilled musician. He was a musician with the ABC Orchestra in Chicago, and ended up being a music teacher in the Tampa Bay area. And then they ended up moving to Miami. I guess it was alleged that he got into some kind of trouble in the Tampa area as a teacher. But I don't know the details. But anyway, when I first heard him start getting into the confusion, he wanted to sound very bad and menacing as though coming out of a tomb. So at that time I hadn't researched it all yet. I think that was actually I hadn't put the two details together. That he staged his death. The indication is that he staged his death as a result of the secret rumoring beginning about Daytona Beach back in after the Daytona 500 race of that year. So anyway, when I began to research the matter, I learned from Truth Finders that Byleth actually is listed as having gone through a transition period beginning on August 1st of 1975 through the 31st, the end of the month. That was my birthday. And that he was listed as, after allegedly dying in Sebring, that he was listed as living in Miami Beach. Well, I don't have the report ready to include those kind of details. Tedious details are a little bit difficult to discuss with anybody in a message like this. But it is important to note that a very secret conspiracy had begun. Reginald Byleth himself, according to my mother, had been gay earlier in his life and had continued to be so. And I believe the indications were of secret Nazi kind of orientation about it. So during my life, pertaining to the grandfather, I hardly ever knew him. He was mostly a reclusive man. The only time I recall visiting a place that he lived during my childhood, he lived in a small duplex across the street from a cemetery. Spent a lot of time using a shortwave radio. Had a Volkswagen camper bus. But pertaining to these days, I learned that after he staged his death, that they decided that I was beginning a secret transition to being homosexual orientation, as the grandfather had been, but they are very scornful about themselves when a person isn't really conforming. So they began to spread very negative, derogatory slandering against me. And one of the symptoms that ended up occurring that I didn't understand about at the time is that later in '79, and also I think it occurred in 1980, is that my mother, when I visited the house in Sebring where my mother and stepfather still lived with their youngest daughter, my younger sister Charlene Love, is that she would sometimes get the autopsy report from Reginald Byleth and ask me to read the section about the brain about it aloud. And so she would have me read it aloud. And the section about the brain was very brief, just to mention what the weight in kilograms was, and the words not remarkable. So what I didn't understand about was that besides his reclusiveness or whatever, that Byleth actually was academically proficient in a lot of ways, and but for that particular report, the words were not remarkable. In other words, nothing much to mention. That was, of course, probably meant to be clinical, pertaining to any damage inside or whatever. But it also ended up being about thinking. And what was starting at that time that my mother knew about is that they were, excuse me, when I cough, my eyes watered a little bit. I'm all right. But what my mother knew about is that they began to get at me, from a pivot of being a secret accusation of a pivotal change, and that it involved something that had been done into my head when I was a baby. When I was first born, or just after I was born, something that was allegedly done in Salt Lake City, Utah. But anyway, that's going to be a different subject. But the reason I mention this, one of the reasons I mention this, is that, like I say, a loud disturbance began in 1989, 10 years after the '79, and that it was facilitated by something that had been done to me in an operation, and that it involved the grandfather beginning to usurp me intellectually and otherwise, technically, and that's about all I can think of, just to get the basis of an understanding. But some of the usurping is partly dangerous. The name Byleth is very uncommon name. Street finders, as a matter of fact, there was only about 3 names. One of them I think is in Rio de Janeiro, and it's just another detail that's important to understand pertaining to the progression that leads up to these dates. So anyway, I hope everyone's having a good day and that this isn't too rambling. Thanks for your consideration.